In the future, humans no longer go outside and instead send androids called surrogates to handle their daily routines. People control these surrogates from the comfort of their homes using special chairs that connect them to the androids through advanced signals. If a surrogate is damaged, the person doesn't feel any pain, but they can still experience all the pleasures the surrogates enjoy. This allows people to make their surrogates perform all kinds of extreme activities. They can also choose how they look, and now everyone on the streets appears young and attractive. As a result, crime and illness decrease, and society becomes more peaceful. However, a group known as the Dreads believes that relying on surrogates is like living a lie. They oppose their use and live in isolated areas. Their leader, known as the Prophet, often broadcasts messages encouraging people to leave the chairs behind. One night in the city, a wealthy man goes to a club and approaches a woman. They step into a quiet alley to spend some time together. At that moment, a mysterious figure appears and disables both of their surrogates before escaping on a bike. The figure moves so quickly that it causes chaos on the road. Shortly after, Agents Peters and Greer arrive at the scene. A police officer informs them that the male unit isn't registered while the female one is, but the owner hasn't reported anything unusual. The surrogates show signs of severe damage, and the memory chip in the male unit is no longer functional. However, Greer still takes it for further analysis. He then checks on his wife Maggie, who communicates with him through her surrogate. Greer suggests taking a vacation without using android bodies. He wants them to travel in person. He also points out that they haven't truly been together for a while, since only their surrogates interact. Maggie responds that she prefers things this way. The next morning, some students discover Jared unresponsive in his chair, indicating he was connected to the damaged male surrogate. Moments later, Greer's boss Andrew shares the details with the agents. 2 individuals have lost their lives following an incident involving their surrogates. Later, Greer and Peters review recorded footage from the surrogates' memory systems and notice a man holding a suspicious device. They conclude that the case may involve intentional harm. They soon receive a call informing them that Jared was the son of Lionel, the founder of surrogacy technology. His company, VSI, Virtual Self Industries, is one of the largest in the world. However, Lionel was removed from the company by his partners nearly a decade ago. Since then, he has lived in isolation. The agents track down Lionel's location and pay him a visit. They are greeted by one of Lionel's surrogates, who explains that he has long been distant from Jared. He had given Jared a surrogate when he went to college, hoping it would help them reconnect. Peters asks several questions that upset Lionel, so Greer steps in and shows understanding, mentioning that he has also experienced the loss of a son. When Greer asks if anyone might have wanted to target Lionel or Jared, Lionel realizes the attacker may have been aiming for him, unaware that the surrogate was being operated by Jared. Suddenly, the surrogate shuts down, and Lionel appears in person, seated in his chair as the agents explain that the technology used by the military can't affect the people controlling the systems. They also reveal that certain components were removed earlier for analysis. Later at the station, Peters finally identifies the man with the device as Miles, someone who doesn't rely on surrogates. Soon, a technician named Bobby, who also avoids using a surrogate, reports that the monitoring department has located Miles, thanks to access to all surrogate feeds across the city. Peters stays with Bobby to track Miles' movements, while Greer heads out to join the pursuit team. Suddenly, an alert goes off, and Bobby notices a troubling situation involving a woman at a hotel. He quickly issues a disconnection order to shut down the surrogates involved. Peters is surprised this is even possible and questions the ethics and legality of such actions, especially if the software were misused. Meanwhile, Miles moves quickly through the city as authorities try to catch up. Greer follows from above. Miles uses his agility to navigate tight spaces and stay ahead, but eventually he is cornered in an alley. Authorities surround him, and he uses a device that disrupts nearby surrogates, causing them to malfunction. He also targets the helicopter, forcing Greer to disconnect while the aircraft loses control. Miles escapes into a restricted settlement, but the helicopter crashes nearby. Greer reconnects and follows him into the area. The locals, seeing a surrogate enter their territory, become hostile and begin chasing Greer as well. As they move through the slum-like sectors, Miles attempts to use his device again, but it no longer works. Greer manages to keep up despite several obstacles and finally corners Miles, asking for the device. Miles hands over a bag, but before Greer can check it, he is suddenly shot at by another person. The attacker calls him an abomination, forcing Greer to disconnect. Back at home, Greer is injured and collapses while trying to move. Fortunately, Maggie finds him and calls for medical help. Sometime later, Miles wakes up to find the Prophet and his followers searching his home for the device. The Prophet demands answers about where it came from, but Miles explains he was simply hired anonymously through disposable phones and doesn't know anything more. Soon, news spreads that the Prophet views the crashed helicopter as a direct attack on his people and calls for a revolution against surrogate society. At the hospital, Greer regains consciousness and learns he has been suspended. Frustrated, he leaves and meets Peters, but begins feeling dizzy, likely a side effect of long-term surrogate use. Peters suggests getting a replacement surrogate, but Greer finds it unsettling. Instead, he chooses to enter the Dread Colony in his real body. Inside, he is disturbed to see his surrogate displayed as a symbol. He also learns that Miles has died and attends the funeral. During the ceremony, the Prophet speaks about mortality as a defining human trait, something artificial beings cannot experience. Afterward, Greer tries to approach him, but is stopped and reminded that pain and vulnerability are part of being truly human experience. Experience shows there's nothing more painful than a parent outliving their child. Lionel points out that if they can trace where the weapon came from, they'll uncover who is targeting him. It likely didn't come from the Dreads, since they don't have the resources. When Greer gets home, he finds Maggie hosting a wild party with friends. In private, he confronts her because he wants to see her true self, not the carefree persona she's projecting. Maggie insists she has changed and that things can't go back to how they were. On his way out, Greer loses control and confronts a partygoer, but stops when he notices something unusual beneath the person's artificial appearance. After Greer leaves, Maggie's surrogate checks on her real body resting in the chair. Maggie removes her goggles and breaks down in tears. Back at headquarters, Greer learns that VSI once had a weapons contract with the military, but it was terminated for classified reasons. Later that evening, a surrogate secretly enters Peter's home, reviews her chair recordings, and discovers Bobby's software capable of shutting down all surrogates. The intruder disables Peter and takes her system, connecting it to someone else. At headquarters, Peter's surrogate is reactivated. The next day, Greer meets the Colonel again and shows him an image of the weapon. The Colonel confirms it was commissioned by the military, but all prototypes were supposedly destroyed. After it was discovered, they could also harm the human operators behind the surrogates. When Greer tells him the Dreads now have the weapon, the Colonel declares that the military will take control of recovering it. In the Dreads zone, the Prophet hands the weapon to his followers and orders them to deliver it to Peters. Later, Greer tries to talk to Maggie about their relationship and the loss of their son, but begins to feel dizzy while sitting in his chair. Meanwhile, Greer meets with Peters, who tells him that Miles had been hired by Andrew to target Lionel. Greer immediately goes to the headquarters to confront Andrew, believing that VSI may have supplied him with advanced technology linked to Lionel and the anti-surrogate movement. When Andrew looks away, Greer disables his surrogate, causing it to shut down. Greer then checks Andrew's computer and downloads information related to the situation. As Greer leaves the building, the real Andrew contacts other agents and reports Greer for misconduct. Afterward, Greer meets with Peters in her car, still unaware that someone else may be controlling the surrogate. Greer explains that Andrew's files suggest Lionel is connected to funding the anti-surrogacy movement, and that he has discovered the codes needed to activate a special device. Peters secretly contacts headquarters to reveal Greer's location. Suddenly, a truck crashes into them, forcing their car off the road. As Peters walks away with the device and access codes, Greer follows, leading to an intense chase through the streets. The pursuit results in multiple crashes and heavy damage. Using her surrogate body, Peters manages to escape with agile movements, while Greer crashes into a store and is left disoriented. Driven by grief over his son's death, Lionel Cantor rejects the idea that surrogates benefit humanity. To him, real life requires our true selves, and he's willing to take extreme measures to prove it. While Peter uploads a devastating virus to the global network, Greer fights his way into Lionel's home. There, he discovers a hidden room filled with the machines responsible for his recent tragedies. Lionel, now confined to a wheelchair, justifies his crusade. He believes humanity is already lost, and only a total system collapse can restore it. As the virus goes live, Lionel takes his own life, leaving Greer to make a final stand. Greer jacks into Peter's surrogate and, with Bobby's guidance, manages to stop the transmission with only a second to spare. The human users are saved, but the surrogates are not. Greer makes a pivotal choice. He lets the virus finish its work on the machines. Worldwide, the systems fail. Surrogates collapse in the streets, leaving millions to step out of their homes and experience the real world for the first time in years. Returning home, Greer finally embraces the real Maggie. No more masks, no more machines, just humanity, forced to live authentically once again. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more breakdowns like this. Thanks for watching.